Good morning. Charles Van Morgan Show. Come on and join me. We're going to talk about the death penalty, a controversial capital punishment, and we're going to show you some places to show different particular points about the death penalty. We're going to talk about Carleen Slimmer, Shannon Newsom, and Christopher, the UT murders, Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom, their murders here in Knoxville, and also the murders of Carleen Slimmer by Crystal Pike, but Carleen Slimmer's name you need to remember. And we're going to show you some locations. We're going to talk about the controversial from a sociological criminology perspective about the death penalty. Come on in, join me this morning. Charles Van Morgan, broadcasting live, unbridled news. You won't hear this kind of news anywhere else. The truth that nobody else will tell you. Unbridled. We got nothing to lose. So come on in. We'll tell you the real perspective, unbridled by the legal boards and the crooked legal board in the state of Tennessee, run by the Board of Law Examiners. Because I'm a lawyer, I have but not licensed, unlicensed. I have a degree in a doctor of jurisprudence, and I also have a Master of Arts in Sociology. Come on board, Charles Van Morgan in the morning. Join me this morning. We're going to talk about capital punishment from a realistic perspective, my views on it. What do you think about it? And also we're going to talk about murder. We're going to talk about our social movement organization, Power to You the People. And we're going to show you some locations. Come on in. We're going to show you some locations that show you a significant point of view. And we'll tell you what we mean when we get there. Charles Van Morgan in the morning. We are on our way to a couple of locations to illustrate a point from a sociological criminology perspective. We're going to talk about the death penalty. What do you think about it? They've got some recent cases here in Knoxville, where in the state of Tennessee, where they're setting dates to execute people. Why is that? Does the state use executions to maintain power illegitimately? Or is there a reason behind it? And what are my views on execution from a criminology perspective? We're going to talk about that this morning. So come on in. Charles Van Morgan in the morning. You won't get this kind of news anywhere else. Let me turn this around, turn the light on where you can see me better. And we will start the show. Charles Van Morgan in the morning. Like, share, comment. And we're going to talk about the death penalty, capital punishment in the world. Tennessee, it's in the news recently, so while we're bringing it up, has recently set court dates for Crystal Pike and another man here in Tennessee. And there is a sociological explanation for the death penalty, meaning that it's not just a penalty for crime. People think people get executed because it's legal in the state or the country that they're in, and they committed a heinous murder. It is. See if we can get off the road here. They're not even going to slow down. So it is just that individual case, but it's also involves the social realm, because other people convict people, arrest people for murders. So what is also involved in the decision to charge and who gets executed and why they get executed? Is there a disproportionate number of poor people that get executed above the wealthy who may or may not have committed the same crime that we don't know? That's what courts are for. Who makes all these decisions to execute people? Society does. And outside forces influence the death penalty. People don't execute themselves. So is there a little more to it? So is there a little more to it than just a crime committed, a heinous murder, and then people get executed? According to sociologists, hell yes. Hell yes, it is not always fair and very biased. According to empirical studies, the death penalty. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm just telling you the facts. You may not like the facts as they're presented, and how you interpret them is completely up to you. But the death penalty is issued very biasedly by people who do it. I'm not talking about the murder. Obviously, that's a heinous, sick act, and people ought to be punished for it. I'll tell you my views on it. But I'm saying the way it is dished out, the most serious form of punishment, the way it is dished out is not fair. It's not fair at all, according to numbers and statistics by the people who choose to do it. And that's something that we need to know in a honest and just, fair society, to face the facts. Now, whether or not you agree with it or not, that's up to you. That's up to you. But you still need to face the facts. So we're going to go to a location today, and we're going to talk about the significance of those locations. So join me this morning as we talk about the subject of capital punishment. And the majority of Americans agree with capital punishment. They think it's appropriate and a justifiable response to crime. So that's the position according to surveys of the majority of Americans. And it has declined in its support over the past few years, with mostly older adults supporting the death penalty. And I'm not saying right or wrong, mostly older adults, and also younger people and people with a higher level of education tend not to support the death penalty. So it has overwhelming support in the United States of America. And let's see how many people got on here. Thank y'all. And read some comments. If it is he speaking of West Virginia. Hello, West Virginia. Tennessee scheduling people for death sentence. That's right. Bless the Lord. So yeah, I'm talking about Tennessee executing people and putting them to death for crimes that they committed. And at the end, I'll tell you my position on it from a sociological criminology perspective, and tell you my thoughts on it, and tell you why that I think what we can do, what we must do, because of the death penalty. Society puts people to death. It's our government that we vote for or don't vote for. So we should have a choice in promoting in the death penalty. We should have a choice in it, and we do have a choice in it by who we vote for. Charles Van Morgan Show, unbridled news. You won't hear it anywhere else because I'm not controlled by the Tennessee Board of Law Examiners, the crooked lawyers, although I have the same education. I have a Master of Arts from the University of Tennessee in sociology, and the emphasis in criminology. So I know a little bit about crime causes, and a little bit about empirical studies about the scientific proof, not just from the emotional standpoint of retribution. And I'll tell you what I think. So we're getting started in the morning. Thank y'all for joining me. Come on in from all over the world. This is a world phenomenon. They have executions mostly in America, North America, and there's some countries that have even more executions than America. So we're trying to dodge the traffic going down here to a specific location where we can show you something that we want to point out. The 8th Amendment to the Bill of Rights, our framers probably didn't intend to ban capital punishment. It was the ban on prohibiting cruel and unusual punishment in the 8th Amendment. And it probably wasn't intended to ban executions, at least at the time. But it did probably intend to restrict the way it was administered, meaning you can't just beat somebody to death. But although some would agree with that method of execution, because in the heinous manner that some people are murdered, they suffer, and it takes them a while to die by the hands of these murderers. So some would agree with that. But the 8th Amendment in the United States Constitution bans cruel and unusual punishment, but the framers probably didn't mean that the states couldn't execute people. So there we have that. So probably when the framers wrote the Constitution, they likely believed in the execution, because in the early colonial days there was a lot of people executed for a lot of different reasons, other than the most heinous crime, murder. So it probably wasn't outlawed, and when the framers wrote it, and they knew it was going on, so they didn't outlaw executions. But the method of it was probably, under the 8th Amendment, probably not intended to ban it. But you can check in your country whether or not it was how the executions come to be in your particular laws. I'm speaking of the United States of America. And murder, not the common cited offense in earlier colonial days. Rape, kidnapping, treason, robbery, and even train wrecking was executed in the early history of the United States of America. So when the framers wrote the 11th Amendment, there was a lot of executions going on. So, and it's very popular in America. Most people agree with the death penalty. That's just according to surveys, although it's going down the past few years. So let's see so many comments we have on here, and likes and shares. Charles Van Morgan in the morning. Support the channel. Like, share. If you subscribe, hit the like button so I know you subscribe. So we're talking about executions from a sociological criminology perspective based on empirical science, instead of just plain emotion. Telling you what a expert in sociology. I say I know a little bit about it. I know a lot about it. I have a sociology degree from a major university. So let's see how many people got in here. And also, a lot of people know the same things I know. They just don't know that there's science and empirical studies behind what I'm telling you. So thank y'all for joining me. Charles Van Morgan. Unbridled news from somebody that's unbridled from the crooked societal forces, crooked people in government power. You won't hear this news anywhere else, just from me. So subscribe, like, and contribute if you can. Help this social movement. So we're on our way to a specific location, and then when we get there, we'll tell you what we're gonna. Yeah, it was not intentional torture, man. That's right. We hung up on stealing and killing. Hello from Sweden. Hello, Sweden. Okay, get to the point. Well, it's a little bit of a long show, so we're getting to it. We're keeping it in suspense. So we have to give you the groundwork before we get there. So in Tennessee, the death penalty is so popular in Tennessee that Supreme Court justices are appointed by the governor, and they're voted through some judiciary board that he promotes, that he organizes. So they're pretty much assigned by the governor of the state of Tennessee, and we have a man in the governor's office now that is not a very good man. His name is Governor Bill Lee, and he, for a lot of different reasons, he promoted a woman to Major Stacey Heatherly, and promotes investigators in traffic enforcement major wrecks that probably aren't honest people. I know they lie, because I know for a fact that I've caught them in lies. But he promotes Supreme Court justices, and then every 8 years, they have a retention election. There's nobody running against them, so it's a little bit easier for them to win. There's nobody trashing them. So running on the other side, telling the other side. So they're just up for a retention election. So it's It's a pretty easy win for them. They just on the ballot, keep them or get rid of them. Nobody pointing out, like you have in the presidential election or in the governor's elections, that nobody pointing out the other side that, hey, they did this or they did that. There's no adversity, so they get reelected every time to sit on the Supreme Court bench, and I did say bench, and do whatever the hell they want to do. And sometimes it's right, and most of the time, with all that unbridled power, it's crooked as hell. They're crooked as hell people on the Tennessee Supreme Court. They steal money from all over the nation. Still your tax money. Supreme Court justices in Tennessee. Now, they're built up to be some kind of highfalutin honest people, but they're the most dirty, gluttonous people in the state of Tennessee. Supreme Court justices that spit out a bunch of lies and stuff that's not true, and it's given the legitimacy of the way to law, because Supreme Court justices decided it. They were appointed by the elected governor, so it must be right. But we have this thing in the United States called the Constitution that prevents the government from doing certain things to me. Even elected politicians can't do certain things to the United States of America, because individuals have rights. That sets the United States apart from any nation in the world, or supposedly. But they trample all over the Constitution. How'd they do that? It's a form of an act of war, because they have a gun. And they just step on soldiers' blood that fought for our Constitution. And in the backroom hallways in their crooked judicial system, violate the Constitution, the United States of America, from our courtrooms, from the judicial benches in the Supreme Court. So they're elected by a retention election, and normally they just get reelected. But Penny White, a Tennessee Supreme Court justice, ruled in some of her decisions against executing a man. She ruled that he should be given a new trial, and he got a new trial. Excuse me, let me get these papers straight. He got a new trial 2 times because she ruled in favor of not executing him. And she was up for a retention election, Penny White, and she's the only Supreme Court justice in the history of the state of Tennessee to date that's ever not been held during a retention election. Although she's got nobody running against her, nobody pointing out bad stuff about her. The public knew that she had voted against executions, and Tennesseans are notoriously for executions. So in the retention election, some people got together and pointed out that she was against the death penalty, and will rule from our judicial benches what they disagreed with. They agree with executions, and she's the only person in the history of the Tennessee Supreme Court to be voted out of office. So she wasn't elected in the retention election. Supreme Court Justice Penny White. So it is a political phenomenon, executions. The public is for it in Tennessee, and if you're not for it, then you might lose your job politically, as Penny White did. And she took over the law school dean at the University of Tennessee down here. After she was kicked off the bench, not retained in the election, she became the University of Tennessee law school dean. So didn't suffer any grave damage because got a lot of money being a law school dean, and she was probably going to be the next Chief Justice because she was popular among other Supreme Court justices who nominate their Chief Justice. So had she been elected, she'd have been the Supreme Court Justice, the top judge in the state of Tennessee, and been against the death penalty. So having more influence, and maybe had she been reelected, you might not have the death penalty in the state of Tennessee because of a Supreme Court justice. So that's how popular the death penalty is in the state of Tennessee. And I'm going to tell you my take on the death penalty by showing you a few, and there's arguments for and against, and you can make your own arguments. Are you for the death penalty or against it? Put it in the comments, and I'll tell you my take on it from an educational perspective. And you can take all that education, which is good, knowing the facts, knowing empirical studies and the evidence that shows different bias and stuff. But you can take all that and throw it in the river because plain great American citizens have a right to make up their own minds about what's just and unjust in our civilized society. We got the right to make up what we think civilized and right and not right. So I know in education ain't all that. So thank y'all for joining me. I'll tell you what I think, and spell it out to you. And I got some notes here, so you can see Penny White, the only Supreme Court justice not nominated, not reelected in the United States, in the Tennessee Supreme Court. Here's some of the pretty nature here. The executions were legal in the United States, but in 1968, Furman versus Georgia ruled that executions violated the 11th Amendment. The United States Supreme Court ruled that executions in America violated the 8th Amendment, which is a prohibition, not necessarily on executions, but prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment, Furman versus Gregg. So in 1968, there was a moratorium on executions. Just like, there was a moratorium put out by Governor Bill Lee on executions pretty much during his first term in office. And I'll explain to you why I think he did that. And I know he's got his lies. He's a transvestite politician that promotes people that steal valor and are on the job not fit for duty and does all kinds of other heinous stuff. And I don't know his heart. He may be a Christian. I know he don't act like one, and I know he don't live like one. And he put executions out in his first year in office. So there's a ban on executions from 1968 to 1976, and then Gregg versus Georgia was decided, and it established a model for states to allow execution, spelled out circumstances. In the 1968 moratorium, the Supreme Court left open reinstatement if there are safeguards against violations of the 11th Amendment, if it was done not in a cruel and unusual manner. And then in 1976, it was reinstituted under the new patterns for states to be able to execute people. So in that short period of time where there was not allowed any executions from 1968 to 1976, It'd be interesting to know there wasn't allowed any executions, so if you committed murder, then you couldn't be executed. So it'd be interesting to know if the murder rate went down during that period of time. If the murder rate went down during the time when there wasn't allowed any executions, then you would think that not allowing executions causes the murder rate to go down. So the argument that executions causes less people to commit murder would not be true. So were there more murders between 1968 and 1976 when if you murdered somebody you couldn't be executed? But the fact is, and sociologists I think try to spin this to try to say science is behind not allowing executions, that it doesn't decrease the murder rate. And they explain it in several different ways, and what they say may or may not be true, but factually, counting the murder rate during the period from 1968 to 1976, when there was a ban from the United States Supreme Court on capital punishment, there was actually more murders. More people were killed when you couldn't execute them, murdering people. Now that's the numbers. Now, some sociologists, and it may be true, you make up your own mind, say, well, that was due to other factors, societal forces at work other than the execution not being in effect. That was just one small factor. So between 1968 and 1976, if you murdered somebody, then you couldn't be put to death because the Supreme Court said that was cruel and unusual punishment. So you're walking around in society and you know that you're in a period, say it's 1969, 1970, that you know that they don't execute people. The Supreme Court's decided that you can't. It's cruel and unusual punishment. Is that going to weigh a factor in whether or not you kill somebody or not? That they might put you in jail, but which you can may or may not break out of, and you maybe or maybe not be able to kill in prison, but they won't take your life from you. They can. It's unlawful for the state to do that. They'd be committing a constitutional violation, and they can't violate the Constitution. But there were more murders during that period of time when they weren't allowed to execute people, when they reinstated the death penalty in 1976. And there were still more murders. So I don't know. But it did not lower the murder rate when you couldn't execute people for it. So let's continue with the dialogue. 53% of people in 2025, mostly among older and educated people, among less educated people, support the death penalty in America. So it's a very controversial issue. And listen, how many people got on here. We'll continue with the dialogue about the death penalty and talk about social movements a little bit. And also we will show you a location we're going to illustrate a point. And when we get there, we'll tell you what the point is. We're going to hopefully 2 separate locations. So thank y'all very much for joining Charles Van Morgan Show. We are talking about the capital punishment because of the fact that the Tennessee Supreme Court has set dates to execute Krista Pike and another person. The reason why I mentioned Krista Pike is she committed her murder here in Knoxville at she was a student at the Job Corps Center. And I also have a little story to tell you about that. I have some inside information about that because she committed a murder on the UT agricultural campus, which is near the Job Corps Center, of Carlene Slimmer, Crystal Pike. She had two other accomplices, but their name's not important. Let's don't memorialize them. Carlene Slimmer is the victim of this one of the most heinous murders in the city of Knoxville at that time. And then there was two other college students that got murdered later by a man that has also been sentenced to death. And so we're talking about the death penalty. Do you agree with it or not from a scientific point of view? And we're going to a location to illustrate a point about it. Whether you believe in it or not, that's up to you. Most people do. The support for it's going down. I'll tell you my view on it. Charles Van Morgan in the morning. You won't hear this anywhere else. There's so many people got in here. Listen to some comments. So, Amnesty International, particularly because the death penalty, has criticized the United States for government policies that violate human rights. So Amnesty International has said the United States is a country that violates human rights of citizens. In the United States, there's over 5,000 executions since executions were started being counted by the government in the 1930s. There's been over 5,000 executions in the United States. It's one of the leading countries in the world, Saudi Arabia being another one. And you can look at sites on the internet to give you your statistics in your country about how many executions they are. For a recent number of yearly executions in your country, look at Death Penalty Information Center. Iran, Saudi Arabia, USA are all high in execution. So look at the Death Penalty Information Center on the internet, and it will tell you your particular number of executions in your country, and even whether or not some countries don't even have executions. So So let's turn the light back on here. Thank y'all for joining me. So you can look at the Death Penalty Information Center to find executions in your country. And this is about power to you, the people. The people ought to be able to decide what violates human rights and what doesn't violate human rights in your country. So like, share, comment, and contribute if you can. We're going to put out information about unbridled news that you won't hear from the regular news channels, because I'm not held down by government agencies and government policies and government opinions, by lobbyists. I'm controlled by God Almighty. I pray and ask the Lord to tell me which way to go, and by the Holy Scriptures, and by science. Science is a good thing. It's a real phenomenon. I mean, science is what you do every day. You can look at things and say, well, that's the way it is. I see it with my own eyes in that particular case. And when you keep seeing things that way, you say, well, that's the way it is. And if you see enough cases of that, then you form your opinion. Hey, that's right. So how many of y'all have ever talked to somebody that a family member has been murdered, or maybe one of your family members murdered? How do you feel about the death penalty? Despite all these studies and scientific stuff, how do you feel about it? That's science, how you feel about it personally. And that's what scientists do. They talk to people that have had a family member murdered and gather information and look at that information. They talk to They gather information about the murder rates in countries where there is a death penalty. They gather information from countries where there's not a death penalty, and see if the death penalty actually cuts down on crime. That's just one of the arguments for the death penalty, is that it doesn't cut down on murder. So why should we have the death penalty? Because if it doesn't cut down, if it doesn't lower the crime rate, then maybe we shouldn't have it. But that's just one of the factors. There's other more compelling factors that I think, but that's part of science. So you do science every day. So what you know and think, if the news channel or the government tells you, no, it ain't the way you just seen it, it ain't the way you think, then maybe you need to trust yourself, because the government lies. And the government puts people down at a 4% rate of false capital punishment sentences. There's an error rate of 4%. That's not an insignificant number. So 4%, about 4% of the people, according to scientists, that are in prison, been sentenced with capital crimes, that have the death penalty awaiting them, are not guilty of it. That's not an insignificant number. Because if you execute them, if you execute those 4%, that's you and me in America, maybe a higher rate in other countries. That's you and me killing someone without reason, without justifiable reason. Before God, do you want to stand before God and know that as a nation, your country has executed 4 people out of 100 that didn't deserve it, that were innocent as you are, because your government went rogue and did things it shouldn't have done? I wouldn't want to. That's one of the responsibilities that we have as a nation, as power to you, the people, to vote. Because if we vote for honest government, if we vote for honest prosecutors, honest judges, then we're not responsible when someone gets elected that we didn't vote for, that we didn't support, because we didn't support that. So if you don't vote, I would ask you to pray to God and ask Him to lead and guide and direct you about who to vote for. Because if you don't vote and someone gets in office, like the people in office now, and they promote the death penalty and execution of the 4% by their rogue judicial rulings, then you're part of, a small part of, and I don't know how much God will hold you accountable for it. I think that He will. You're part of people being put to death, which is heinous, and when they didn't deserve it, because we have rogue prosecutors, rogue judges, rogue people in this country. And that's one of the most compelling reasons why people do not agree with the death penalty, according to science, is because they don't support it, is because of false convictions, false executions. Now, it's hard to determine the number of people who have been executed wrongfully because they've already been executed. There's not a real important agenda, because there's nothing they can do about it if they find out they've been executed and they really didn't do it. But there have been people, a small percentage, who have been executed by the state, which you are the state, we're the government, that didn't commit the crime. And that's us as a people. We are the government that are putting people to death that are completely innocent of the crime, and the person that did it is gone free. They've escaped justice on this earth, but let me tell you what, and they might escape justice on this earth. A lot of people in government power escape justice. But the eyes of the Lord in every place, beholding the evil and the good. God's seen them do it, and God knows. You won't get by with anything when you stand before the great, holy, and just God. But that's not justice on this earth. And we need to contribute to appropriate justice on the face of this planet, on this earth, and do right on this earth. And one of the ways you can do that, is through VOTE, Voters of Truth Enraged. or if you're in Tennessee, Voters of Tennessee Enraged, a social movement organization that I will lead, and I'll talk to you about social movements. Voters of Truth Enraged because of wrongful executions. I'm not saying we shouldn't give people the capital punishment. I don't know. You decide for yourself. I'm saying that it is your responsibility as a citizen of the United States, as a citizen of Tennessee, as a citizen of your country, to take an active role in making sure that your government does not wrongfully execute people, that you have fair and honest government as far as possible. And we can do better than 4%. I mean, we're killing 4% of people that are on death row, some wrongful executions, that didn't do anything wrong. And we're responsible for that. If you know of injustices in your court system, if you know of wrongs in the court system, and we know that voting matters, because it got Penny White voted out of office because she voted against the death penalty. She voted against retribution, which is one of the main reasons why people believe in the death penalty. And we're getting to the location where we're going to point out something very astounding, empirical evidence, see it with your own eyes, about the death penalty. And we're almost there, and it's a location where you can see up close and personal, hey, this is one astounding fact about executions, because we already know that during the moratorium on executions in the United States of America, that murders went up. Would anybody be able to send me 30.50 for a gallon of gas, 24 and homeless, trying to have an interview on Tuesday scheduled? Okay, well, you know, that's up to y'all on here. I don't censor. Thanks of glory. I don't censor. The family sued for $20 million and only dropped the lawsuit when the state fired Charles Van Morgan and took away his pension. That's absolutely not true. That's fake news. That's false. And if you want to back up the government and their lies, then that's fine. Go ahead. I'm not censoring lies on here. You can lie on this page, but you can also tell the truth on this page. And if you want to hear the lies against me, then you need to wait in line. There's a lot of government officials that have put those 4% in jail and gave them capital punishment, that lied on the person that they're giving capital punishment to. So join that 4% of liars that are in the government. And, you know, I got a lot of haters. And people that stand up for something have people that hate them. So thank you. You know, if you don't stand for anything, you're not going to have any opposition. But if you're standing for truth and justice, there's evil out there that are going to try to knock you down. So don't be distracted by the liars. They're part of the 4% that have put people in part of our injustice system, that have given people the capital punishment that didn't do anything wrong. So if you think you'll get a reaction out of me, you know, liars will be friars. Let's make a joke out of it. But they're running up my views and making me money. So contribute. Hit the like button, share, and if you subscribe, then hit the like button so I know you subscribed. So the truth's going to get out despite distractors, and that's part of the marketplace of ideals. You know, are you for the death penalty or are you against it? You got a right to state your position, for it or against it, and because everybody needs to know why you support it and why you don't, so they can make up their mind. Maybe you got a compelling argument, maybe you don't. I'm giving you my arguments based on empirical studies, based on science, and we're going down here to a location where it will give you a visual clue of a astounding fact, one of them about executions. I think the state of Tennessee is executing people because the state, historically, people in authority, government, have executed people during times, or institute executions, capital punishment, during times when their authority and their legitimacy is waning. Means that people are challenging. They're saying that you're not representing people like you should. You're not doing what you said you would do. You're not a legitimate form of government that represents us. You lie to us. People in power that we've given power and trust when people are alleging, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not legitimately governing for the good of society. You're using the government for self-interest and pointing out fallacies in their crooked, dirty lies. And during a time when people are challenging what people in government power are doing, like maybe handing out the death penalty illegitimately, by maybe when they're challenging people in government's power, historically throughout history, this is a historical fact. You can look it up. People in power have started executing people. Now that's a scientific sociological phenomenon. People think, well, it's due to murders. Maybe some part of it, but it's also due to people attacking the legitimacy of those in power. So they start executing people to show people as a sign of strength that we will kill you if you stand up against us. We will show you what we can do. And here we go. And they start executing people. So when you see a period of time when there's mass executions in a country or nation, you might want to look beyond the murder rate and look at the power institutions that maybe they're more corrupt than they ever were. So Charles Van Morgan in the morning. So let's show you this location right here. This is a morgue. This is a morgue right here. It's actually a funeral home. There's a mortuary in the bottom. That's not the county morgue. But the point is people coming here, people that come here in the morgue are not coming back. I want Charles about 4 or 5 times to come to. Charles never really explains. Why, yeah, I have. Yeah, I have. So I'm challenging authority, ain't I? So bring in the baloney. So this is a location that we're going to. This is a mortuary, and I dropped some of my papers. This is a mortuary, a morgue. Now there's a county morgue, county coroner's office. It's just a few miles from here. I didn't want to walk that far. But you get the point. It's a morgue. People that are coming here they're not going anywhere. They're dead. Executions are final. People that are executed are not going to commit another crime. They are gone. When you have people in jail, they have the opportunity of getting out of jail through the court system. We turn the light on. Through the court system. Through rogue judges, allow them like Penny White. Allowing them to get out of jail. And they have the potential, they already had it in them, to murder again. So this is a final. If somebody's murdered somebody and they really did it and they're executed lawfully, then one of the compelling arguments is for the death penalty is that it doesn't reduce the murder rate, although when there was a moratorium on it, it did. It increased the murder rate. And also when you put somebody down, you're not murdering them. It's a state sanctioned capital punishment through the judicial system. And although they have 4% in jail with death sentence, they have 96% of, according to the statistics, actual cold-blooded murderers in jail, and that are potential reoffenders. But here's the mortuary, morgue. But when you send them to the morgue, there's no reoffending, so it's 100% capital punishment. When you execute somebody, it's 100% effective on that person will not murder anyone else ever again on the face of this planet. You'll send them to a judge that is 100% accurate, that sees the evil and the good all the time, everywhere, and he knows. Honest and fair judge. Now, in the Bible it says that a murderer will not enter into heaven. So, if I were you, and I am me, before you get mad enough to kill somebody with malice aforethought, which is a legal term meaning that you did it intentionally or you knew that your conduct was likely to cause the death of someone else. And I would be concerned not so much with the rogue justice on this earth. You may or may not get executed. You may or may not face honest judges. You may face penny white. That'll let you keep repeating the legal process where the citizen said put them down twice and you didn't vote for it. But when you stand before God Almighty, He knows what you did. He saw it. And it says in the Bible very clearly that no murder went into heaven. So, there's a hell I believe you'll go to. That's part of the reason why we have our mass shootings in high schools and a lot of killings and murders, because people don't believe in God. They don't believe that the eyes of the Lord in every place beholding the evil and the good. They don't believe that no murderer will enter into heaven. I do. I believe that. And that's not one of the reasons why I won't kill. I won't kill because it's wrong. But if I did, I'd stand before an almighty God and wouldn't go to heaven. That's what I believe. But, let me add this. I believe no unforgiven murder will go to heaven. It's not the unforgivable sin. Now, I'm not saying that you can murder somebody and ask God to forgive you, because then you had a purpose in there, and you might not be honest in your request for forgiveness because you planned that in the first place. So I'm talking about somebody that has murdered somebody when they're in jail waiting execution, and they're providing an opportunity to talk to a minister. I believe they can come to know the Lord Jesus Christ, and He can come into their heart and save them, and they won't go to hell. So I believe no unforgiven murderer will enter into heaven. Now, that's my position. But one of the reasons why we have such a high murder rate, I believe, is because we've taken the fear of God. I wouldn't fear this government. This government's rogue and dirty as hell. They put people in jail to exert their strength and power, not to enforce criminal laws, not to stop the high murder rate a lot of times, but it's to show that we're powerful, keep us in power. Powerful groups maintaining their power, because that's what they're doing now. They're starting to execute people in the state of Tennessee, giving people dates. When they had a moratorium on it just a few years ago, you couldn't execute people in the state of Tennessee because Governor Bill Lee had 3 years in office. So he wasn't worried about it, but now all of a sudden they're reinstating it. So what's the deal? They're up for re-election. Politics and the death penalty go hand in hand. They know people are for it, but why do they not want to do it? Why do they not want to do it? I'll tell you why I don't think they want to do it. Because of the fact that they don't care about you or your family. They don't care about retribution as it applies to other people, because they're not public servants. They're not out to serve the public. They got public power by lying to you to serve themselves. So the only way they're for the death penalty is if somebody kills one of their family members. somebody does something to them, then it's personal. Even though they've swore to uphold the public law and order, I don't give a damn about the public law and order. They could care less. So we're going to another location where I'll show you another astounding, up close and personal fact about executions. That's the morgue. That's where they go when there's capital punishment. The morgue I just showed you. They won't reoffend. And if they're not forgiven, they'll burn in hell for what they do. If there's any solace for anybody that's had somebody murdered, and it happens a lot by a family member murdered, the solace is in executions, and then they'll face God for it. And God knows what they did, and they will pay for it. Now, they can be forgiven, but God knows. So if there's any solace, an unforgiving murder is going to burn in hell. Now, there is a forgiven murder, I believe, that honestly, that in their heart have accepted Lord Jesus Christ. And that's not my decision to make, but they will go to heaven. Now, that's a unbelievable thing. Will they be in heaven with the person that they murdered? Or if the person they murdered was not a Christian and they murdered them, are they in hell and the person that murdered them in heaven? Now, that's an interesting line of thought, but that's not man's law, that's God's law. That's God's law. You know, accept the Lord Jesus Christ in your heart and ask Him to forgive you and come into your heart and be forgiven. We don't understand everything now, but we will. We will about God. But who can turn God's hand? No one can. That's God's decision, not mine. And I humbly bow, not before man and his laws, although God says to obey man's laws, but not when they're trying to take away our lives, health, safety, and well-being, which is what they're doing now. But God understands. You can trust God. You can't trust man. Man's in a fallen state, but you can trust God, so trust God. God knows, but there's some astounding things that will happen that we don't understand now. So just rest on the fact that you can trust God, that God will administer justice to whom is due, and that God forgives through the Lord Jesus Christ. So we're going to another location. Charles Van Morgan in the morning showed you unbridled news from a sociological, criminology background and perspective. I also have a doctor of jurisprudence and also lived a long life. I've seen a lot of evil happen, and there's evil out there, evil people. So that was a mortuary where finality, executions are final. They won't reoffend. They can't be let out by a rogue Supreme Court justice. And they can't break out of jail. There are cases where murderers have broken out of jail. It's quite common, although they claim that in today's modern society with more modern prisons and technology, that it's harder to do that. Now, granted, that's true. It is harder to do that. But it happens on a frequent basis. You see it all the time on the news. Now, usually these people get captured, but notice you don't hear about it when they don't get captured because they can flee to other countries that have less technology. I know of cases where people have came from other countries, undocumented illegal aliens, and committed horrible offenses, criminal offenses, involving taking the life of another person. And then no one knows who they are. They're hard to identify because if they don't have low social ties, come across the border illegally. And then after the murder, when they're being charged, they run off to another country, and they have never been found to this very day. So sometimes murderers don't always get caught. And if they break out of prison, there is a possibility that they will murder again. So the finality of it at the morgue is one astounding argument for the death penalty. And I'll show you another location that shows you the other side of the argument as far as daylight is from dark. So we're on our way down to the bridge, Charles Van Morgan in the morning. So hang with me till we get to the other location. We're going to talk more about capital punishment from a sociological point of view, and we're going to talk about a way that we can make capital punishment, if you want it to exist or not exist, or the way we can make it legitimate, because it's not legitimate now. It's not. Tennessee's instituting the death penalty after several years of a moratorium because of the fact, in my opinion, that the governor's up for re-election. So they're showing people, hey, we'll give you the death penalty, because people in public office don't care about retribution. They don't care about punishing people. Only if someone does something to them, then they care. Because the death penalty is a hard thing to do. It's hard to put people to death because you're taking somebody's life. It's a state sanctioned, the criminal punishment. And there's no coming back, no appeals. And it's hard to do that. And people in state power want a gravy train. And there's things that when you take over government offices that you have to do that the public doesn't have to do, and the public shouldn't do. It'd be vigilantism if they did it. So there are things in public power that you're given authority of the public to do, and that they don't have to do. They shouldn't have to do it. They're the public. That's why they voted you into office, for you to do it. And one of them's execution. People don't like to put other people to death. They don't want that on them. What if it's one of the 4%? So what they do is, it's the reason why we don't have executions, not many of them. Like there maybe should be, I don't know, what do you think? But the reason why we don't is because people in public power don't want to do their damn job. Because they're the ones actually administering it, they're the ones actually doing it, they're the ones actually ordering it, judges, prosecutors. But a lot of them in power aren't willing to do it. They got in office for the gravy train, for the power, for all the good that it brings them. But when it comes to doing hard things that the public put them in power to do, there's no incentive for them to do that. So their feet drag. They put things off, give them another appeal, and sometimes exonerate them, give them a pardon. There's been people that have murdered in the state of Tennessee that have been convicted of murder, that have been pardoned, exonerated, given time served, and they're out. They're out of jail after they've murdered somebody. They were convicted of it anyway. Whether the jury got it right or not, I don't know. But they don't. So they don't want to do the hard things. So that's one of the reasons why they do it. They don't execute people. Is because they're not true public servants. They don't want to do the hard things that it takes when you're given authority and power and privilege and expected to serve the public. So that's one of the reasons why they don't do it. So let me see how many people we have on here. Charles Van Morgan show Unbridled News. We're covering executions, talking about how the government and the social factors that play into executions, the lack of them, or if it's your side there's too many of them, then the government has a hand in doing it. The government's the one that does it. Or don't do it if you think there ought to be more. So I don't know. What do you think? Actually, I do have an opinion on it. When we get to the bridge, I'm going to tell you my opinion on executions. I just told you a little bit of it. The government, people in power won't do it because somebody didn't kill one of their loved ones. So they don't give a rat's ass, excuse my language. They don't care. They care about themselves. Now, if somebody killed one of their family members, then they would try to have them executed. They'd be executed pretty quickly. It would matter. But somebody like me or you out here, or some of these Tennessee families that aren't wealthy, well-off, politically connected, they just have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, 50 votes. So they don't matter politically. The person that murdered their family's in jail and will be in jail for a long time. Long time, even though they murdered one of their family members. But if somebody murders one of Governor Bill Lee's family members, and don't do that, they'll be executed pretty quickly. They would be. I assure you. It happened quick, fast, and in a hurry. So that's just the honest truth of it. Power and privilege matter. And that's one of the things about executions. The opposition toward it, and this is empirical evidence, says that the lower on the income scale you are, the more likely you are of being executed. The lower you are on the income scale, the less well off you are. If you're charged with a capital crime, whether or not you did it or not is outside the point. Maybe you didn't do it, maybe you did, but whether or not your income level determines whether or not you'll get the death penalty. So if you murdered somebody in cold blood, maliciously, and you have a high income in America, and it's probably this way all over the world, then you have a high income, you have a less likelihood of being executed. Whether or not you did it or not, you did it, but you have a less likelihood of getting executed because of your power and privilege than me or the mass millions of people all across the state of Tennessee. Now that's not right, but empirical studies show that social status has a lot to do with capital sentences. The rich get richer, commit the same crimes, empirical studies numbers, and the poor, according to Jeffrey Ryman, get prison. But I've changed that title, according to Charles Van Morgan, get executed. The rich get richer, and the poor get executed. That's a fact, that's number. So what I'm saying very clearly is that the fact that if you are accused of a capital crime, whether or not you did it, just like rich people, whether or not you did it, say you didn't do it. If you're accused of a capital crime and you're of low socioeconomic status, your chances of being executed are very high. Even if you didn't do it, you might get executed anyway. You'll be one of the 4%. That's one of the oppositions to the death penalty. Now, it has nothing to do with crime. Street crime has nothing to do with murder. It has something to do with the more heinous crime. The more heinous crime is people in power crime that will convict you when you're completely innocent. So the policies set forth in our government, who they go after and who they don't, they go after poor people. They go after us. They go after me and you and the millions of people all across the state of Tennessee and the millions and millions of people all across the United States. That's who the death penalty goes after. Capital punishment goes after. Whether or not you're executed is another thing. But if you're poor and you're accused of a capital crime, you've got a high likelihood of being convicted and put on death row. According to empirical studies, income status matters. And that shouldn't matter in America, but just supposed to be blind. It's not blind according to empirical studies. It's not blind at all. It's very sees how much money you got in your billfold determines to a large extent whether or not you're convicted of a capital crime, put on death row, facing an execution. Now, do you like that? Hey, it's not pretty, but it's the damn truth. according to facts. If you're rich, you might get out of it. Look at O.J. Simpson. He brutally murdered, brutal murder of one person that wasn't even involved in him. He didn't even know, didn't have anything to do with him. 100% completely innocent. Now, Nicole Brown Simpson was completely innocent too, but she chose to get involved with O.J. Simpson, was deceived, but that was her ex-husband, and she's completely innocent. But the other gentleman, Mr. Brown, he didn't have anything to do with Mr. Simpson. Now, Mr. Simpson's social status and income level was to the point where he could hire highfalutin fancy attorneys that got him out of a double murder. Now, he's dead now, but he should have been executed, could have been executed for the murders. But he didn't even get convicted. But if me or you had done the same thing, blood all over your house, blood all over your car, testimonial evidence, climb over a fence, people hear you left your blood behind your house, that would be a shut and closed case. You'd be pleading for mercy. You couldn't get a defense to defend you with low income status. So your income status has a large part to do with it. So we're almost to a location where I'm going to show you the other side of the death penalty. And we're going to talk about a few more points about capital punishment and how the government uses it to maintain illegitimate control over you. I mean, look what's going on now. You won't hear this anywhere else. Charles Van Morgan, Unbridled News from an educated life lived perspective. So you can think about what you want. I got my marketplace of ideal to put out to you, to evidently 500,000 people so far. So Tennessee people in power in Tennessee government, your wicked corruption is getting out live all over the world how dirty thou art. So and I'm in a position where I can put it out. I mean, and I'll talk about this. They have alleged falsely about me that I seen a baby burning to death and intentionally drove past them and let them die, which is a dirty lie. That's a lie. That's what they've said. Put it all out, all over the news, all over the world, with malice aforethought, not putting a gun in my head, not trying to execute me, falsely trying to take away my life by destroying my reputation worldwide with lies and put it through an illegitimate court system, put a sentence of death, quite frankly, almost the same as a death penalty. Won't even let me be a lawyer. So if they say worse stuff about me, where have I got to go from there? I don't have nowhere down to go. I can only go up, and you got somebody on this page spitting out that lie. So they put me in a position, I ain't got nothing to lose. Well, they're going to say worse about me. You can't say anything worse than it's a lie in the first place. So you can beat on somebody so bad it don't hurt anymore. And you didn't get the killing done that you want to do to me. I survived your malicious execution of my character. You know how I survived it? With the truth, because I didn't do it. It's so absurd what you said. Your crooked court system did it. And now I'm pointing out how your crooked court system works for the power elite. Your crooked, dirty judges in the state of Tennessee work for the power elite. They don't work for the people. They want to administer legitimate executions only if they're involved in it. That's how dirty your Tennessee government is in the state of Tennessee. And maybe, I don't know, a lot of people say it's that way everywhere. It's probably that way everywhere, some a little better and worse than others, and it may be pretty appropriate and legitimate and honest in some states. I don't know. I can't speak to that because I don't live in the state you live in. You do, you know. You tell me. I know from firsthand experience, Governor Bill Lee will not execute people unless, even if they committed a heinous, dirty murder, unless it's politically expedient for him because he put a moratorium on it, not for the sake of legitimate legal purposes, for the sake of he didn't want to do it. You ask any governor in the state of Tennessee, they don't want to do that. They want to get out of their 4-year term of office before they administer judgment to anybody. Put it off, let the next governor have to deal with that, because they don't want to be public servants. So we're about here to show you the other side of the story, the other side of the coin. Let's see how many people we have on here. Read some comments. We're going to talk more about capital punishment and the government's control over you. Let's see what we got here. So we got quite a few people in here. We'll turn the camera off. And so we'll run across the road here. Hopefully we won't get run over. So, Charles Van Morgan in the morning. Unbridled news. Talking about the death penalty and the state's people in power's use of it to control the population and threaten them. Here recently in Tennessee, they have set death penalty cases for Krista Pike. She was, I'll tell you about that. And I know some interesting details about that. She was here in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was a Job Corps student. Carlene Slimmer was also a Job Corps student. And her and her boyfriend and another lady lured Carlene Slimmer away from the Job Corps Center in 1995 because Krista Pike thought that Carlene Slimmer was trying to get her boyfriend. And evidently she wasn't, but it was out of jealousy. So they lure her, Krista Pike and her boyfriend and another lady, lure Carlene Slimmer away from the Job Corps Center in 1995, take her over to the UT Ag campus, and they commenced the beating on her. She's begging for her life, and they stab her multiple times with a meat cutter, cut her head open while she's begging to live. Horrible, horrific murder by two of them. The other lady said, the other accomplice said she didn't have anything to do with it. She was cooperated with the state and got a lesser sentence, accomplice after the fact. So Carlene Slimmer got murdered, and Krista Pike took part of her skull, made a histogram out of part of her skull, and took it back to the Job Corps Center with her. It was such a brutal murder, her body was not even identifiable. They put her in the woods off to the side, and there was blood all over the road. And this is the interesting fact. I worked at that time for the University of Tennessee Police Department. I was off that night that it happened in 1995. I didn't work that night. But another UT police officer was patrolling the Ag campus after the murder. Wouldn't have been nothing he could do anyway, but after the murder. And he saw what he thought was transmission fluid all over the road. It was blood, turned out to be blood, all over the road where he was patrolling. So he drove right through it. There's police car tracks through the murder scene because the police officer thought it was transmission fluid. He didn't recognize it as blood. So literally police car tracks after the fact through the murder scene. Now, a lot of people don't know about that. That's the truth. And we're going to finish that story, show you here is the other side of the coin that I've been telling you about. The first side is, really the inside is the mortuary. If you execute people, they end up in the morgue. They can't escape. They can't commit crimes, another crime of murder. They can't reoffend. There are people that have committed murder while they're in jail for capital crimes while they're in jail. They murdered in jail, which is what Krista Pike went on later to do, try to kill somebody in jail. Reoffended, tried to in prison. She's been sentenced to death next year. She murdered somebody here in Knoxville. Here's the other side of the coin. This is the Knox County Jail. The Knox County Jail, right there on the It's on the bottom level in that glass area is the Knox County Jail. It's right above a parking lot. How smart is that to build a parking lot above a county courthouse where it's easy to drive a truck with nitrous oxide with fertilizer and blow up that whole building. They're real smart in their and don't do that. You can't do that now because it's only you could do it when it's first built, but they've only let city employees do that now, and people that have got an ID badge and everything been cleared through their investigation. You can't do that now. But when they originally built it, they built it to where you could destroy that building. You know, they're real smart government people. They've figured out that terrorists now are a threat, and they've stopped from doing that. But you could literally blown up the whole courthouse. They made it dangerous for themselves. That's how smart these idiots are. They build a courthouse above a parking lot. I mean, look at what Timothy McVeigh done. If he were here, he could have done a lot more damage. Now, you can't do that now. They've got a big barrier that comes up, a concrete barrier, and they ID people, and the garage is closed to the public, although the public paid for it. But what a bunch of idiots out to not allow parking in there at all and make it a office buildings. They could revamp the whole thing, but they're still idiots. There's still idiot people in state government power that are dangerous to themselves and others. So that's the other side. People that murder people and are given death sentences are brought here, and they in the city county building to stand trial, because that's a courthouse. And even after they're convicted, they're brought back several times for rehearings. It's a process that takes years and years. So they can escape right here. They can escape. One can run across the bridge and kill me before they're captured. So what I'm saying is, if you don't give them the death penalty, recidivism of that person is a likelihood, and it does happen. It don't happen very frequently, but it's 100% if you execute someone. They ain't doing it again to anyone else. So that is an argument for capital punishment. If you put them in the morgue, I guarantee you, they ain't doing that again. They're not able to. So proponents of capital punishment say, you put them in that building over there and let them live a life in prison, and they can get out of there. And they can rape, rob, murder, and steal. And also, they can rape, rob, murder, and steal. They can rape, rob, murder, and steal while they're in prison. Krista Pike attempted a murder while she was in jail. She's been right there in that jailhouse after she was convicted. She's been right there in that jailhouse for rehearings and stuff. She could have broke out, and while she was in jail, in prison, still alive, she attempted a murder. She tried to strangle somebody to death. Now, she's got her reasons for doing it. Says it was self-defense. She got convicted of that. So she's been convicted of murder, calling Slimmer on the Job Corps campus, and she's been convicted of attempted murder while she was in prison. And she's been in prison from 1995 until 2025. So that's 95, 05, 15, 25. 30 years she's had the possibility and took advantage of it to try to kill somebody else. But if she were at the morgue, see the difference, she wouldn't have been able to kill anybody if she'd been executed. So that's just an argument in favor of the death penalty. And the UT police officer, not me, I wasn't even working that night, drove through the crime scene. You won't hear that on the news. Thought it was transmission fluid, and he was driving through blood, police officer. And it was actually a pretty good police officer. He made a mistake. They don't tell you about stuff like that on the news. a policeman drove through a murder scene. Now, it wouldn't have made any difference, although they did have tracks of a police car. Maybe they thought that was a suspect. I don't know how they investigated. But they did have a Ford, actually it was a Chevrolet Caprice at the time, tire tracks through the murder scene. Maybe they traced it back to UT Police Department, but they found out who did it. So I'm just telling you, the way that happened, inside information, there was a UT tire tracks through the murder scene. I worked at UT Police. That's how I know. I wasn't working that night. And so that's what happened. Now we're going to finish talking about the death penalty. Things happen it's a social phenomenon as opposed to illegal. That's what sociology, which violates social norms and rules and makes a social response. That's what sociology is about, how society reacts to murders. And the only Tennessee Supreme Court Justice, Penny White, wasn't retained in the election in 1996. First justice to be removed from the bench. She was expected to be the Supreme Court Justice because she, in a 3-2 decision, State versus Odom, upheld the court upheld the lower court's conviction on June 1996 for rape and murder of an elderly woman, but overturned a death sentence for a resentencing trial due to an insufficient case presented by the prosecution. It was only death penalty decision White ever participated in as a member, but she overturned a death sentence because of insufficient evidence, according to her, by the prosecution. So it's political because she didn't uphold the death sentence, returned it to the trial court to citizens. So she wasn't reelected because she didn't uphold the death sentence. So it is a political phenomenon. So here's some of the arguments for and against the death penalty. We'll talk about sociology and how it affects the death penalty. So let me get my papers together. This is just about sociology. So we talked about it's hard for the courts because they know how biased they are, wrongful convictions, and they don't care not to kill people. And they have not done the harm to them or their family and their suffering. That's why it's hard for them to give people the death penalty. It's better for them just to put it off or try to delay it till the next election. Supporters of the death penalty say it's a collective moral outrage, and anything less suggests a tolerance for murder, and it's immoral. And they even say it's immoral for people to oppose the death penalty because of victims. They're putting offenders over victims. Opponents, abolitionists, say that there is wrongful convictions, 4%, and that it doesn't reduce crime, and the error rate is 4% of death row inmates may be innocent. So opponents of the death penalty say that if you kill one innocent person, you shouldn't do it. One of the arguments for the death penalty is retribution. The fact that punishment inflicted on someone for a wrong or criminal act is retribution, because it a lot of times satisfies the family. Now, in the case here in Tennessee, where Davison was convicted of killing Shannon and Newsom, he was brought back to court and given another hearing, his lawyers arguing that his conviction of death sentence was not fair, and they said that he wasn't given enough time to prepare resources and prepare an effective defense that new scientific evidence could establish his innocence. But I don't believe that to be the case. He was a ringleader of the Newsom and Christensen murders, and his father said that that it was a waste of time for him to be brought back to this courthouse. He was brought back to this courthouse after he was convicted of murder, Davison, and his family had to re-go through him still alive. And in Tennessee, they have people that are on death row and they're in jail and they've been given capital punishment, and it's been 30 years since they were given capital punishment, and they get sick. They're in jail waiting court hearing, re-appeals and reapplies and new chances, and they've been in jail 30 years. Longer, they've been alive 30 years longer than the person that they killed, maybe a little child, and they get sick. And the jail takes them to the hospital. So they're in jail facing the death penalty, and they get sick, and they're in the hospital being cared for, nurses and resources caring for them to keep them alive. And these are people that have brutally murdered little children. So they're in jail, and they got to keep them alive. They're waiting appeals, and their execution date hadn't been set. And it's been 29 years since they were sentenced to death, and they're in the hospital, nurses and doctors taking care of them, keeping them alive so that they can have another appeal. Well, the person they murdered died brutally in a horrific incident. Some shot, some suffered for a while. Like the Newsom and Christopher were tortured. And if Davison gets sick, they'll take him to the hospital and treat him. Doctors will treat him. Nurses will give him medicine to keep him alive. And while he brutally murdered a young woman and a young man, and the father is wanting retribution. Hey, it is fair. You took my daughter's life, or the other family. You took my son's life. Your life should be taken. That's retribution. It is a heinous crime, and you need to be taken out of this world. It gives the family peace that you're not alive anymore. You killed my family, but the state, and I can't kill you, that's vigilantism, but the state took you out. And me personally, if someone hurt a member of my family or someone murdered me, I would want them out of this world. I don't think they forfeited their opportunity to live. So that's my position. They forfeited their opportunity to live, and they need to be taken out of this world. Now, we have a certain responsibility to take care of that 4%, and that's where we need the social movement organization to get rid of corrupt people in power that do these wrongful convictions. So there have been people, and this is one of the reasons why they started executing people in the state of Tennessee, because of moral outrage and because of politics, that they were going to start losing their grip on power. Even though they didn't want to do it because they don't give a damn, they don't care. People were starting to get outraged because a man that was on death row, scheduled to be executed, got sick and was taken to the hospital. And he died peacefully, with nurses taking care of him, doctors taking care of him, a peaceful death in a hospital with him trying to save his life when he brutally murdered somebody. And people were morally outraged. He died peacefully in a hospital. He wasn't executed. And he should have been executed when the person he murdered was brutally killed. That's retribution. So the willingness of legislators and juries to impose death sentence is one of the reasons why the United States Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976, because juries give people the death penalty. So the public believes in retribution. That's what Greg noted. The majority popularity of capital punishment in public opinion polls is the reason why society, which is the government, believes there ought to be death penalties. So why do we have our government stopping them, like Governor Bill Lee? Although one of the reasons, and this is why we need to vote people out of office, one of the most compelling reasons to not administer the death penalty is because of corrupt government. People in power corruption. People in power corruption. So if we have less people in power corrupt, then we have executions that are dealt out fairly, not because of rich and poor, because right now if you're poor, you got a chance of being executed. If you're rich, you do the same thing, you got a chance of not being executed. And also there's a racial disparity in executions according to scientific empirical evidence, and empirical evidence is scientific studies where they look at and count things, and scientific studies that can be replicated. So according to empirical studies, black crimes against white victims as opposed to white crimes against black victims, the black criminal is more likely to be given a death sentence than a white person. So race plays a part in executions, and that's just a fact. So if you're a black person, you're more likely than a white person to be executed for the same crime. So there is a disparity according to the numbers, in black and white crime. Now that is not very pretty, but that is the truth. And another reason why we should vote to make sure that the government is more fair to stop wrongful executions is for 4 different reasons that I know exist. One of them is false confessions. Now, these are where people are coerced into confessions by police, by road police. They are convinced to plead guilty, they sign a false confession. Now that happens pretty frequently. Why do people confess to crimes they didn't commit? Why do people commit to murders they didn't commit? I don't know. It's been proven that people confess to crimes that later it is proven by scientific evidence, by DNA, that they didn't do it. So one of the reasons against executions is people confess to crimes that they didn't commit. Another reason, and this is because of government corruption. People in power are corrupt, allowing that to go on when they know they just want to find somebody to accuse to make themselves look good in the papers, and prosecutors and judges that we got the person when the real person's going free. It's because that's the reason why the social movement, why you need to vote. And the other reason, which I know for a fact, these other reasons take place. I know it happens for a fact. I've seen it with my own eyes. And these are reasons against executions. I'll explain to you why they happen. It's part of the 4%. Let me see how many people I got on here, and we'll tell you the other reasons, and I'll explain to you how I know this happens. So yeah, we got quite a few people on here. Thank you all. Like, share, comment, contribute, and hit the subscribe and hit the like button so I know you subscribed. So another reason for the false confessions is false or misleading forensic evidence. So forensic evidence is DNA and fingerprints that the police have collected to prove somebody did something, and false or misleading forensic evidence. That's scientific evidence that shows somebody did or didn't commit a crime, and that is a reason why they shouldn't execute people, because of false information. The other one that I've seen close up and personal is perjury or false accusations. Perjury or false accusations. Now, Now, I know you'd say public officials won't lie under oath. They put their government officials, police officers, they put their hand up and they swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. And then sometimes they go on to say, he did it. I know he did it. We have this DNA evidence when they have falsified the information. They lied under oath. Just like in the, called him the N-word, and he testified under oath, knowing that he had. And I would have to say, I would have to testify that, yeah, I had in explaining the definition or different ways, not anything meaning in a derogatory sense. But he said no. And they had tape recordings of him using the N-word. So he lied under oath, and prosecutors and police officers and people in government power in the state of Tennessee lie. I know they lie. Terrell Johnson lied under oath in the case that wasn't involving a death penalty case, but was involving a serious case with a death, ruining my reputation, which his reputation is ruined. He's a liar. So they lie under oath to get promoted. They lie under oath for political reasons, because if they have a suspect that they have for a murder, say there's a heinous murder, and the public is outraged, they want somebody brought into court and arrested so that they can feel safe, and they want the person that done it under arrest and given a death sentence, because it's people are for the death penalty. They voted a Supreme Court justice out of office for overturning a death penalty case. So there's public pressure to convict somebody, to find the person to convict them. So say they can't find them because they're inept. I mean, look how inept they are. They build a parking lot under a courthouse. That's how inept they are. They're pretty stupid. So they need to find the perpetrator, but they're not capable of finding the perpetrator. They can't even find drunk drivers. On Friday and Saturday night, statistics say, numbers say, empirical evidence says that half the people on the roads on Friday and Saturday night are under the influence of alcohol and or drugs. Half the people are impaired where they shouldn't be driving on a Friday and Saturday night. So you would think a state trooper would make hundreds of drunk driving arrests a year. You know how many drunk driving arrests they make? The average trooper in the state of Tennessee makes 2 drunk driving arrests a year. How many Friday and Saturday nights do they work? So they're not doing their job. They can't even find a drunk driver when there's hundreds, thousands of them out there, and the fatality rate skyrocketed. You know how many drunk driving arrests I made a year? I made about 150 drunk driving arrests a year. Lowered the fatality rate. So they can't even find a drunk driver. So you think they can find a murderer that's a little more calculated in what they do? Drunks are even impaired, their mind's not right. They do stupid stuff. They bounce off telephone poles, slam into the side of things, hit people, injure them. Injure their little children in cars that they're driving drunk. Sometimes. They're easy to find, easy. How many times have you been driving down the road and you see a drunk driver weaving all over the road, and you know somebody's probably drunk, or you see them slamming to the guardrail or something? Hey, that person's drunk on Friday, Saturday night. Or they're driving down the road without their headlights on, pitch dark. They're drunk. A trooper can't find them. A police officer can't find them. And one of the reasons why they can't find them is because if they find them, they may get fired by people in the government, because it might be one of the people that's in government power. So it ain't just them. There's a lot of political effort that keeps them from doing that. A lot of politics keeps the law from being enforced, as long as it don't endanger them. So you think they can find a murderer, people in government power? Hell no. They're inept, they're stupid. So they grab somebody off the street, and this happens. They get them to sign a false confession by tricking them or telling them they'll go easy on them, all kinds of dirty lies. And then they fabricate, they lie under oath. Terrell Johnson lied under oath. I know they lie under oath. So I know that I can prove. I proved it. People say I don't present any evidence that I didn't do anything wrong in that case. Yeah, I do. I'll present it again. I'm going to write a book about it. And if you want to buy it, let me know. I'm going to write a book about the government corruption, people in power, how dirty they are and what they did. So I know that government officials will lie under oath. It's a common thing. They lie all the damn time, people in government power, for political pressure, because they know if they get somebody convicted, even if they didn't do it, it might help them get promoted. When they get promoted, people in government power get promoted for lying. So there are people convicted because of perjury. So I know that happens. People convicted of murder because officers lie under oath. The government lies under oath. They lie about DNA evidence, and they lie about facts, and they get people convicted that didn't do it, and then the murder's still running around there. So that is one of the reasons against the death penalty, is that, and which is a substantial one, and one of the reasons why people need to vote. Perjury or false accusations, which like they made against me. Official misconduct. Now, yeah, that's where they do things for political reasons, and they lie about facts, and which they did in my case. They arrest somebody to get somebody that they claim is guilty so that they can brag about arresting somebody, but it's the wrong damn person. So that's part of the four things. And that last one is the reason why you might go to jail if you don't have a lot of money, is inadequate legal defense. Is an argument that people use why there shouldn't be the death penalty, because people on the lower income scale, with average or even a little bit above average, get convicted of murder even when they didn't do it. So that's part of the 4%. And the most compelling reason is that we are putting to death someone who did not commit the crime, and we as a society should have bore that. So they say because there's heirs that we shouldn't put one person in jail. We shouldn't put even one person in jail and murder them and kill them, a murder if they didn't do it, because of the error rate. Then we shouldn't execute people because we're even killing one person. And the answer to that is to vote, VOTE, Charles Van Morgan, and join the social movement, Power to You the People, where we can lower that 1%, that 4% to a null level where that doesn't happen, and only give the death penalty to cases where, extreme cases, where it is obvious and easy to figure out that that's the person that did it. So let me recap here, and then we'll get off here until tomorrow morning. We'll talk about sociology, and we'll talk about the social movement and the factors contributing to a social movement where we can make a difference in wrongful convictions. And my personal belief is that we should have the death penalty if we vote and have an honest government, because you forfeited your right to live on the planet when you've murdered somebody. So let me go recap these main issues about the death penalty from a sociological perspective. Capital punishment has been seen by a majority of Americans as an appropriate and justifiable response to crime. So it is a popular phenomenon, and the second thing we covered is Tennessee Supreme Court Justice voted out for perceived being against executions, although she says she's not. Penny White, removed in 1996 because UT Law School became UT Law School until 2000. She retired from the law school in 2022. And had she stayed on the bench, she would have been Chief Justice, so you might have had different decisions about the death penalty. Let's see here. Let's see how many people we got on here. So we're recapping. There's an ambulance. As I always say, those are angels when you need medical treatment. And the next thing that we talked about is get my notes straightened out here, is the death penalty was stopped in 1968 by the United States Supreme Court because it was seen to violate the 11th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment, although the Supreme Court left it open to reinstate the death penalty if it was done in a more humane manner. So in 1974, the death penalty was reinstated by the United States Supreme Court, and states began to reenact laws to make it less cruel and unusual punishment. Amnesty International in particular has said that the United States violated civil rights because of the institution of the death penalty. 53% of people support the death penalty in the U.S., mostly among other and less educated people, and lower support among Gen Z and higher educated people. Having no money leaves one in an especially vulnerable, precarious position when faced with a charge of murder. Precarious means likely to fail, not secure. So if you don't have much money, you might get executed, while richer people won't. In 2025, discrimination based on victims' race and lack of money continue to play a significant part in capital punishment. So that still goes on today because of crooked people in power. And the ABA has called for a moratorium on capital punishment until issues could be worked out at appeal unfairly and discriminatory, the American Bar Association says. So even lawyers know that it's handed out wrongly because of them. So the ABA, the American Bar Association, people that try these people and have them convicted, are admitting that they're crooked. So Lisa Perlin is over, the representative for not the American Bar Association, but for the Legal Testing Association. So they even admit that they're guilty of not dealing the death penalty out appropriately. So they even admit that they're crooked themselves. So lawyers admit that they're crooked. That's the most honest thing they do. The reasons against the death penalty are false confessions, false or misleading forensic evidence, perjured or false accusations, which I know happens, and I know false or misleading forensic evidence or false or misleading evidence happens because I know they make it up. The judge makes up evidence sometimes, even in capital murder cases. I know they made it up in my case. The judge put a light on the back of the car that was not on, even according to eyewitnesses on the scene. So a judge far removed put a light on the car. A judge will make up evidence in capital murder cases. A judge was under the influence in a capital murder case here in Knox County Courthouse. And I'm for executions, but I'm for making them fair, voting people out of office, false perjury or false accusations. So I know state officials commit perjury. Terrell Johnson, Major Stacey Heatherly now, and they get promoted for false accusations. So there's an incentive for them to lie. Colonel Tracy Trott lied under oath. The prosecutor in Shelby County, the biggest county in Tennessee, lied under oath. Bill Goober, the Captain Satterfatter lied under oath. So I know these government officials lie. So can you trust the death penalty inadequate legal defense? So I had a prepaid legal service that did a good job as far as they could. The state had 2 attorneys. I had 1. The state had 2 attorneys. So they have unlimited amount of tax dollars to prosecute people. And people with less money don't have the money to hire a defense team like O.J. Simpson for the truth to come out. So they can obscure the truth with their 2 lawyers that you pay for to convict somebody, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 lawyers to convict somebody, and a criminal defendant in a capital murder case might have 1 or 2. No political pressure to make capital punishment fair. Exact opposite. That's the reason why they deal out capital punishment cases in politics, because there is no political pressure for them to not do capital cases fairly or to stop executions. The political pressure is the exact opposite, to execute people at an alarming rate. Wrongful convictions to death penalty continues to happen in 2024. There are 200 people, wrongful convictions to death penalty, 200 in 2024 alleged. 1 innocent for every 8.2 people executed in the northern area. So there's 1 person for every 1.2 people. And this is not because I don't believe in executions. This is because this is the fact. This is because of, this is the problem. This is the problem. It's because of people in power and government power that are crooked. So they put people 4%, you and me, on death row without us even doing anything. That's not a reason for not having capital punishment. That's a reason to vote these people out and put them in jail for their lies and deceit. Put them in jail, just like they put people in jail that don't even belong there. One of the reasons for capital punishment is retribution. Punishment inflicted on someone for a wrong or criminal act. Greg noted, that's majority opinion that overturned the decision for the moratorium. This is what instituted the death penalty in the United States of America. In 1974, the United States Supreme Court said the majority popularity of capital punishment in the public, according to public opinion in the polls and the courts, routinely administer capital punishment. So a jury usually convicts people, and if they're given correct, right information, they convict people of capital punishment. So the problem's not juries and people want it. They think it's retribution for the victims. They put the victims of crimes above the perpetrators. It's the fact that there's 4% wrongly convicted, and that's because of the dirty people in government power. So it all comes back to the same issue. Dirty, corrupt people in government power, not the government. The government's not run right. That's the problem. The willingness of legislators and juries to impose death sentence. This retribution is an appropriate function of death sentences, falling with the boundaries of decency in the U.S. So the death penalty, according to the United States Supreme Court, which I agree, is falling within the boundaries of decency in American society. What's not falling within the boundaries of decency is the 4% that's wrongly convicted, and that's because of the dirty people in government power right now. That's because of dirty Governor Bill Lee, dirty former Governor Bill Haslam, and the dirty governor before that didn't even have executions, continue to put them out. Right now there are 2,100 people on death row, as a race of the victim plays a part in death sentence in 2025 to this day. So it has political value. Supporters, collective action, moral outrage. Anything less suggests a tolerance. It is immoral to oppose victims over defendants. So that's what I believe. You ask the father of Shannon Newsom and Shannon and Christopher. They want the Mr. Davison to be executed and put out. He has forfeited his right to live, quick, fast, in a hurry. So I agree with death sentences. The reason why we don't have death sentences is because people in power they didn't kill one of their family members. I think that we should vote people out of office that are wrongly convicted people, and that we should have the death sentence within 5 years of conviction after we get rid of corrupt people in public office. Wrongful convictions, not a trivial error rate. According to empirical data, 4% death row inmates may be innocent. And that 4% is due to the dirty people in government power, which is my final point, which is why we need to vote these dirty people out of office so we can eliminate that 4%, only put people in prison that are guilty of the heinous crimes that they're charged with, and then administer capital punishment. And here's the kicker: within 5 years after their conviction, give them 5 years to prove their innocence, give them adequate legal defense, and for the family, for the sake of society, so we can have 100% non-recidivism rate. You have 100% of the people that are executed ain't going to offend anymore. That's pretty good odds. Forfeited their right to live. You have some of the people at the morgue that I showed you earlier, 100%, they ain't doing it no more. Can't. And you have a percentage, although not high, but you do have a percentage, and they're talking about taking innocent people's lives. A percentage that are at this courthouse on the bottom floor that can get out of there. They get out of there all the time. They get out of there, want to get out of there and run down the street and kill me. Try to. They wouldn't get it done, let me tell you. They would not get it done because I have means and measures to defend myself. So one of the means and measures is right here in my pocket. See the outline there? And I put it in different places. But they won't get me. They won't get me killed. There's an unmarked police car. So they won't get me killed. Let's see what the plate says on the back yet. So they won't get it done to me. I'll defend myself. Self-defense is a good thing. Don't depend on the government to take care of it. They're inept. They can't even find drunk drivers. They're all over the place. They'll do things for political reasons. So a large percentage of people that commit capital crimes that did it, that are guilty, blood all over them, killed little children, did heinous, horrible, sickening things, forfeited their right to live, are housed right there at that courthouse on the bottom floor, and they get out of there all the damn time, and some of them have to kill people. And also, even if they don't get out of there, they're still on the bottom floor. Just like Krista Pike, they try to kill other people in the jail, and that's not right either, to kill other people. Maybe they're in there for theft or burglary. Say something happens to you and you get put in the Knox County jail. A crime you didn't commit. People think, well, I don't care if they kill somebody else in jail. Well, I do. That's not right. That's wrong. And we're creating an environment where a murderer is in jail. Look at that bottom level. A murderer is in jail. Say you were put in jail wrongfully, and one of those murderers that they still kept alive, that didn't escape, was in jail with you, and they get a shoestring put around your neck, try to kill you while they're in jail. They didn't even escape. And you're in jail wrongfully, which is a less likelihood, but it's also a likelihood, just like them breaking out of jail, they do all the time. So there is a likelihood that a person that has murdered somebody, recidivism rate, they'll do it again. And we're keeping them alive so that there's a possibility of them murdering again. So there's 100% chance, of some chance, they may murder again, just like Krista Pike did. And 0 chance they will offend again when they're at the morgue, which is what happens when we administer retribution and justice. So quite frankly, I believe in the death penalty. I believe that it ought to be done within 5 years. But here is the big caveat. I use these big fancy words that these highly educated idiots like to hear. Let me give you the reason why I believe that with a little hesitation. With a lot of hesitation. Only if we vote people out of office, the corrupt people in government power that are causing that 4%, and they cause every damn bit of it. Every bit of that 4%. If we had legitimate people in our government offices, legitimate people that administer justice in our governor's office, legitimate people in our courtrooms, legitimate police officers, and there's a lot of them, and the system is not legitimate. The system is crooked. We need to change the system to where it's about justice, and justice is truly blind. If we had that, and we can get that by voting on the face of this planet, God's the judge in heaven. He's the ultimate supreme judge, and he judges on the earth, but we're the judges and jury at the voting polls. And the caveat and the reason that we need to institute the death penalty within 5 years is after we vote these crooks out of office. It's about people in power, in government power, that are crooked as hell, that are causing death and destruction all across the state of Tennessee, all across the United States, go on, and even maybe in your countries and other countries. So let's get this movement fired up against these crooked people. Power to you, the people. And institute a death penalty that is fair and accurate in the most heinous cases where it is so very obvious that there's no reason to disbelieve because the system's not corrupt, and there's an off-ramp for innocent people, and several off-ramps for innocent people within 5 years, and execute them within 5 years for retribution for the family. And let's see about the murder rate. I bet it'll go down. We'll be able to find out. So let's look at some questions, if y'all have anything to answer. Any questions? We've been on here for about an hour. If y'all have any questions, let me know. What do y'all feel about the death penalty? Like, share, subscribe. We'll be back on here tomorrow morning to talk a little bit more about crimes of the privilege, which is executes and putting people wrongly on death row. And we'll talk about social movement organizations. Talk about power to you, the people, and we can make a difference. We're the judge and jury and executioner on the face of this planet. We're here to do God's work on this planet to make it a more fair, just society legally through this social movement. Power to you, the people. And I believe the people will execute people justifiably and lower the fatality rate. So we'll be back on here tomorrow morning about maybe 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. Charles Van Morgan, Unbridled News. So we talked about the death penalty. Thank y'all for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and help us get this movement going, and we can make a difference in the state of Tennessee in the most heinous crimes, and stop the government from using executions to exert and keep power instead of what it should be for, for retribution for the people. So we'll read some of your comments and then we'll get off here. Thank you all very much. Let's see what we got here. Hey, yes, Charles did the about 13 for 4 or 5, and I noticed that never really explained why he was fired. Okay. So last thing I'll say is God loves you and I do too. Until tomorrow morning, thanks for joining. And God loves you and I do too.